Hello and welcome to a special Car Dealer Live. It's special because it's of course new car registrations day today. The SMMT has published the number of cars registered in September. Of course, September is a crucial month. Not only was it the 70 plate month, but there were hopes that this was going to be a bumper month for car registrations before a slowdown towards the end of the year. Now, to discuss this a little bit more is one of my favourite guests, obviously. I only talk to nice people. It is the chairman of ASE Global, Mike Jones. Hello, Mike.
Good morning. How are you?
I am very well, thank you very much. Lovely to have you on. This is a live show, so if you do want to ask one of us a question, then please do drop it into the comments box. But I think it's probably worthwhile if we look at the data for September. It's just come in from the SMMT. Now, September was down 4.4%. The SMMT are calling it the weakest ever new plate September. We'll come on to that in a moment. Now, there were just over 328,000 cars registered in September. The decline represents a 15.8% drop on a 10-year September average. Now, lot of things to discuss there. Mike, is it good news? What are you taking away from that? Should we be worried by this data?
I mean, digging into the data is, as always, is really quite interesting. The first thing that sort of I take away is the tone of the SMMT's press release is really quite negative. It feels like it's building up for a sort of a begging bowl request coming out here, because it really is highlighting some of the negatives. The lowest ever that we've had since we switched to the two-plate system. The offers are there, but it's not enough to help business and personal confidence. Harking back to the fact that yes, it is down, but it's not. If we go back to sort of 2010, 2011, it's only slightly down on where we were then. So no, and you can see as well, and we'll get into some of the more granular detail in a minute, but the drop was all in business, which in the nicest possible way is a drop in pre-reg. Yeah. There's been fundamentally a drop in the late month registrations, and that's the reason we're down. But just on an overall level, it feels to me like the SMMT are really, they want to make a hit with this and go to government and say, look, we need some support here, and look how bad it is, and we need your help.
Yeah. No, I think it's good that you picked up on that, because it's really, I mean, it's blatantly clear in the press release that the SMMT have published this morning. I mean, you look at Mike Call's statement, his comment. He says, during a torrid year, the automotive industry has demonstrated incredible resilience, but this is not a recovery. It's the poorest September since the two-plate system was introduced in 1999. Unless the pandemic is controlled and the economy-wide consumer and business confidence rebuilt, the short-term future looks very challenging indeed. Now, you and I have discussed this a lot over the past few months. It's this talking down of the industry. And we had Mike Hawes on the show about a month and a half ago, and he was trying to promote this positive feeling within the industry. But this is pretty negative stuff, isn't it? And, a cynic would say that they are trying to go cap in hand to the government. Perhaps now is the time the SMMT is really going to push on the government, really lean on them for some automotive support.
Yeah, that's certainly what it feels, because I mean, we spend all our time chatting to retailers out there, and it's really not that bad. No. In the nicest possible way. The profitability has been very strong as we've gone through the summer. Later on this week, I'll be publishing the numbers for August. Used car profitability is at record levels for most people. After sales has been strong as we've been catching up from the lockdown. And really, the issue has been on supply rather than on demand. I mean, if we look into the detail, and just to sort of show where it's at, all the way through the month we were ahead of last year. as we went all the way through, we were about on a daily basis, certainly as we got through through the first half of the month, we were sort of 20 to 30,000 cars ahead of where we were last month. In September last year, and that was where it was tracking. We just haven't seen the same volume of late month registrations that we did in the prior year. And so, which is, from my point of view, is good with regards to the industry. It means we're not all getting lined up with a load of pre-reg vehicles. It means there has been genuine demand out there, and there just hasn't been this push. And you can see that actually when you get into the brand by brand analysis, there hasn't been a push from some of the brands that we normally see at the end of a sort of a quarter, end of a plate change month.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting way of looking at it. Perhaps this is a more realistic look at the proper demand in the marketplace. The figures haven't been sort of massaged through pre-reg. And I mean, let's not forget that 328,000 cars in the middle of a global pandemic, when, as we know, things are getting worse. If you read the headlines, things are getting worse by the week. I don't think that's a particularly bad number. And the dealers we've been speaking to throughout the month, yes, things may have cooled towards the end of the month, but generally speaking, during September, dealers were saying they had the best September they've had in years. So I think it's very easy to believe the SMMT's downplaying of everything here. But I think dealers have got to be congratulated for actually performing very strongly during the month.
Yeah, and we all know that registrations isn't sales, and it's certainly not profit. So this is a headline grabber. It's always a headline grabber on a month by month basis, and it's our job to sort of dig down and go, right, well, what does it actually mean? I mean, if you once we got sort of into the last week. This year, we'd already done over 70% of the registrations that we were going to do for the whole month. Last year, that number was 60%. So there has been a big push in the sort of last 3 days last year that we just haven't seen this year. As I said, partly supplies, partly inclination. The brands didn't necessarily want to push that hard. And you're right, the people I'm chatting to, many people have had record Septembers. We've got some more PLC announcements coming out this week. Interims from Virtue and potentially announcements from Lucas. So it'll be interesting to see where they're at. Certainly Pendragon were positive last week, performing well in excess of last year from a profitability point of view, which you obviously covered last week.
Yeah. We'll come on to supply in a second, but I just would like to talk about this notion, this phrase that has become the go-to phrase in our industry, and especially for observers outside of our industry as well. It's this phrase of pent-up demand. Now, do you think it's time that we actually kill off that phrase and never ever say it again? Because if you look at the monthly figures, it was only July that showed an increase in registration. Since then, there have been falls. So if there ever was a thing of pent-up demand, it was in July, wasn't it? It's not now. Like we've just been saying, September's figures probably were a more realistic view of the current market without things like pent-up demand and incentivizing.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. This is a reflection of the trading that we've had. Pent-up demand to me would be orders that were placed immediately afterwards, and then those deliveries being made. Now, we always have pent-up demand because we have this twin registration system. We have orders that are taken in July and August that are delivered in September. That's normal. That's what we have as to the way that we structure the industry. But no, we're not now still, in my opinion, getting the after effects of having been closed for a couple of months in the new car registration numbers. The continued strength of used cars, I think, is actually a change in demand, and the fact that we've got many more people now wanting to drive, people not wanting to take public transport, and there is genuine demand there for used cars, which is producing the sort of record residuals that we're seeing. And from my point of view, analysing the profitability stats, it's much the strength of that used car performance really is driving through to very strong profitability numbers, albeit clearly back to where we started. The SMMT are wanting to highlight the fact that the new car market isn't all that great, or the new car registrations aren't all that great, and therefore please can we have some support.
Yeah, and it really, I mean, the SMMT's tone really does dovetail. Well, it's sort of, it goes into this narrative of the car industry is all about new cars, isn't it? And as we all know, it's new cars are just one part of the industry in which we all work in. Now, we've had a question in from Bruce Beaton. Hello, Bruce. He's saying, how can we ask for support when you see group social media accounts saying that they've had the best ever month? This is a problem, isn't it? You know, you've got the SMMT today coming out with this negative tone, and yet you look at the big PLC Twitter accounts like Virtue, to a lesser extent Marshall, but you know, some of the big group PLCs are saying, look, we've had a fantastic September. You know, the automotive scene is leading the recovery in this country. There's two opposing viewpoints here, isn't there? And if the government is going to offer some support, the industry perhaps needs to come together as a whole, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, just because the retailers are having a strong time doesn't mean to say that the brands are as well. We need to remember that. And it's, you know, the SMMT, whilst in theory representing the whole industry, has always been driven a lot by the brands and the support for the brands and all of the production and the supply companies that go into that supply chain. I mean, the problem I've always thought with any form of a handout is actually getting it to work with from a green credentials point of view, and to work and keep the trickle down effect of that cash in the UK, because clearly a lot of the cars that we would register and that we would want to register aren't produced here. So yes, we'll get the first turn on that cash, but the ultimate employment is then outside of the UK. So that's always been my challenge, and they're not going to they're going to find it more of a challenge to throw some money at the old ICE vehicles. They're going to want to try and support the new technologies. But no, you know, profitability amongst retailers is healthy as we sit here at the moment, albeit they're still playing catch up on missing out on a quarter to a half of March and then being shut for a couple of months. So you know, we are still playing catch up.
Yeah. And despite the doom and gloom from the SMMT, you know, buyers are making a shift in terms of the cars that they're buying. I mean, September alone, petrol sales were down nearly 21%, diesel's down just over 38%, and yet battery electric cars, plug-in hybrids were up 103%, and mild hybrids, which you know, has become the savior of new car sales, really, they're up 215%. So September may be the worst September that we've had in 20 years, but if you compare the market to where it was 20 years ago, the makeup of it is very different now, and buyers are really making the switch to new technology, aren't they?
Yeah, they are, and the supply of those vehicles is not particularly plentiful either. They're the brand, as we actually saw with the incentive scheme that was launched in Germany, where they are providing additional support for the purchase of eco-friendly vehicles, electric vehicles, etc. And all those orders effectively have been pushed forwards to 2021 because the brands are already happy with the level of vehicles that they're pumping out this year to hit the European community targets that they've got. So no, there is it's not easy to provide support that does it in the right way, in the right place now. And no, the customer is definitely making the switch. There's still a lot of education that the industry needs to do and can do collectively between the brands and the retailers to make sure that the customer's happy to do that. And clearly we need support from a charging infrastructure and everything else point of view. But the customer is starting to make that switch, and that is going to be very positive for the industry as we go forwards.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, can we, if September's down, can we rightly presume that the rest of the year is going to be down? You know, September, perhaps we should all be feeling a bit positive about September, because let's face it, it's a pretty positive set of results. As we move towards the end of the year, it's going to be quite a different picture. Is that right to assume?
in the nicest possible way, most of the people that I'm speaking to, we're just a bit nervous about Q4. People don't quite know what's going to happen with regards to lockdowns and the impact that lockdown has on consumer demand in that area. I was chatting to one of the retail group boss on Friday, who's got dealerships in the areas that have been locked down for quite a while, and he said that in those isolated cases, yes, they have seen drop-offs in performance, and everybody else is doing phenomenally well. Where the Chancellor's clearly launched his son of furlough scheme, the sort of job retention scheme. It'll be very interesting to see whether that actually has the effect that he wants. But then that's an even wider picture as to the people who are going to be let go. Unfortunately, as we go through the sort of next 6 months and wait for the economy to fully wake up again, are they people who are buying cars off us anyway? Or is it just the sort of the people who do have a steady job and are looking for different modes of transport that are really going to provide that level of demand for us as we go through Q4? I mean, what it'd be interesting to see is what the SMMT does with the overall forecast for the year.
Yeah, that's what I was saying next. Yeah,
because they came out in July, and we're due an update. The quarterly update is due. We never normally do that many vehicles in Q4, albeit that the last couple of years have been sort of impacted by the WLTP RDE sort of delivery of those vehicles. So I think there is going to be still some strong demand and some strong performance out there, albeit people are going to be naturally nervous about spending money and making sure that they've got a tight rein on all of the retailer costs. To ensure that they do finish up with a profitable year.
Yeah, and judging by the tone in this press release today and the words coming out of the SMT today, perhaps they will revise their forecast downwards. But let's wait and see on that. Can we just talk briefly about shortage of stock? Now, a lot of new car dealers out there are already experiencing this. But for used car dealers out there who perhaps, they're obviously not selling new cars, can you just briefly explain why there is the big potential for a big shortage of new cars coming into the marketplace?
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly we can only register and sell what is physically here. Now, on a sort of macroeconomic basis, that's always been impacted by things like exchange rates and the movement in the predominantly the pound against the euro, with lots of the vehicles being made overseas, and the brands will all look at where they can make the most money selling the car and where there is genuine demand for that vehicle, and then we'll put that vehicle there. And historically, we were always regarded as Treasure Island. They could make loads of money selling cars here, and so we got shed loads of cars, and that is now seeing a rebalancing, and obviously people are, and that's without mentioning the Brexit word into the overall equation. But the euro rate is at 1.1 at the moment, compared to sort of 1.4 if we go back a while, but certainly 1.2 if we go back a couple of years. So the brands are making less money for vehicles manufactured in Europe that are sold in the UK. So that always has an impact, and we see it. We see the impact of what's been going on from a supply point of view in the brand by brand stats. I was just having a quick look. And this was supply in previous year, the previous September, as a result of a shortage of vehicle. But Volkswagen was 39% up, Audi 72% up year on year. But that's really a reflection of how few vehicles that they had in last year that they were actually able to deliver. If you look at some of the other brands, you've got lots of double digits down. Both Mercedes and BMW 23% down, 24% down. So Vauxhall 28% down, Ford 13% down. So there's sort of some significantly ahead and a lot quite significantly down, and for me that that sort of feeds into the sort of supply push or the lack of supply push. It seems to be very model specific in the conversations that I'm having with retailers, rather than the being sort of brand specific, but no, it does then trickle down. That then, I'll still wander into a dealership wanting a vehicle. If they can't sell me a new one, they'll sell me a nearly new one or a used one, because they're still looking to sort of help me out with my mobility needs.
Yeah. That's a good point. I mean, it really was a feature of the latter part of 2019, wasn't it? That particularly with brands like Volkswagen, the price lists were changing every single week, weren't they? Where models would drop in and drop out, and yeah, it was. I suppose it was quite an interesting time if you were looking to buy a brand new Volkswagen, because it suddenly disappear off sale. Now, just to have a quick recap, just because we're coming to the end of the show now, just a quick recap of what we've discussed today. September new car registrations down 4.4%. The SMT, very negative tone. They're saying it's the weakest ever new plate September since 1999. And the best seller for September actually was the Vauxhall Corsa. It was 1,000 units ahead of the Ford Fiesta, but the Fiesta retains its crown as the best year-to-date selling car throughout 2020. So, Mike, like you said, profitability results come out later this week. We will, of course, cover that in detail here on Car Dealer, but very much looking forward to diving into those figures. So, but once again, thanks very much for coming on. Always a pleasure having you on. It's always good to actually get into the nitty gritty of the SMT data, particularly in September, as we've discussed. We don't have to believe the SMT's negative tone. So thanks for coming on.
Great, thanks very much.
So if you want to be involved in a Car Dealer Live just like this one, then please do email me, james.batchelor@blackballmedia.co.uk, or James Baggett, he's james@blackballmedia.co.uk. But until next time, thanks very much for watching, and bye-bye.